Today's International News Bulletin brings you a closer look at why the United States is always ready to launch oil-related wars, a strategy that is essentially not just about resources, but about protecting its ultimate weapon. The foundation of this power lies in an immutable rule of the international market. If any country wants to buy oil from the Middle East, they are obligated to possess the U.S. dollar. This system virtually turns the greenback into the sole key that unlocks the global energy treasure. This is precisely the amulet that helps the U.S. dollar maintain its exclusive position and never collapse. As long as the world remains thirsty for oil and dependent on this energy source, nations must continue to accumulate and pay tribute to the power of the dollar. Therefore, any threat that shakes this order could trigger a military intervention from Washington to protect their core interests. Continuing the story of this energy order, geopolitical experts point out that tightly binding the fate of oil to the greenback, otherwise known as the petrodollar system, has granted Washington an unparalleled privilege. It allows the U.S. to print money to pay off debts and import goods without the fear of hyperinflation like other nations, because the global demand for holding dollars always remains immense. For this very reason, history has proven that any oil-exporting nation harboring the intention to abandon the dollar in favor of trading in other currencies like the euro, the yuan, or even gold immediately falls into the crosshairs of the U.S. Past decisions on military intervention or crippling economic sanctions were often attributed to humanitarian reasons or weapons of mass destruction, but the deep underlying essence was the protection of the U.S. dollar's throne. When a country challenges this rule of the game, they are not merely changing a payment method, they are directly declaring war on the economic lifeline of the world's #1 superpower, making armed conflicts almost inevitable. However, in the context of a constantly shifting modern world, this power gamble is facing unprecedented cracks. The rise of emerging economic blocs, along with the de-dollarization trend, is quietly reshaping the global geopolitical map. As energy superpowers begin to accept payments in other local currencies, the oil-USD alliance, once thought to be unbreakable, is now showing its first fractures. This very reality is pushing the United States into a new mind game. Now, to protect the position of the greenback, Washington no longer relies solely on the muscle power of aircraft carrier fleets or direct military interventions. Instead, a more sophisticated and fierce battle is unfolding on the fronts of financial embargoes, supply chain manipulation, and the reshaping of strategic alliances. The war for oil has now evolved into a life-or-death struggle to test the endurance of an empire, where the U.S. is forced to prove that, as long as the blood of oil still flows through the veins of the global economy, its heartbeat must remain controlled by the dollar. However, the greatest challenge to the throne of the U.S. dollar comes not only from geopolitical rivals, but from an inevitable trend of the era, the green energy revolution. As the world begins a powerful transition toward renewable energy, electric vehicles, and clean fuel sources to combat climate change, the global thirst for oil is projected to gradually cool down in the coming decades. This poses a life-or-death puzzle for Washington, because when the value of black gold declines, its role as a guarantee for the greenback will no longer remain as intact as before. Facing this historical turning point, the U.S. is forced to search for new anchors of power to replace the petrodollar. Observers note that Washington is quietly shifting its crosshairs from Middle Eastern oil wells to high-tech supply chains, rare minerals serving the future such as lithium and semiconductors, and even the control of global digital financial systems. The battle for America's exclusive dominance may no longer break out with bombs and bullets in sandy deserts, but will be decided in laboratories, chip megafactories, and cutting-edge technology embargo acts. Although the form of warfare may change, the core objective of this superpower remains the same, forcing the entire world to continue operating under the rules of the game and the cash flow that they themselves control. This shift is pushing the world into an era full of uncertainty, where the boundaries between energy security, technology, and financial sovereignty become fragile than ever. Other nations, after decades of under the containment of the U.S. dollar, are striving to build alternative payment systems and increase gold reserves as a defensive shield. The race is no longer about who owns the most oil wells, but who will master the financial system of the future and reshape global rules of the game. For the United States, this is a battle with no turning back. Losing the exclusive position of the dollar means losing the ability to dictate the global economy and the supreme power of a superpower. Therefore, whether in the fiery Middle Eastern deserts of the past or on the fronts of semiconductor technology and secure digital finance of the future, Washington will certainly deploy every resource from diplomacy and economics to military deterrence to ensure that humanity's flow of prosperity remains anchored to American power. The outcome of this confrontation will not only decide the fate of the greenback, but will redraw the entire world order in the new century. In that context, the global situation is forming two starkly contrasting colors. On one side is the effort to maintain a unipolar order based on America's traditional financial power, and on the other is the irreversible trend of multipolarization led by emerging powers. This tug-of-war is no longer a localized temporary conflict, but has transformed into a long-term, all-out war that weaves into every economic decision of every nation on the planet. From major powers to developing economies, all are facing a brain-racking puzzle, whether to remain loyal to the old system in exchange for short-term stability or to courageously diversify for future autonomy. It is this polarization that is pushing humanity into a phase of comprehensive reshaping. History has proven time and again that when an old power system is challenged and a new order is trying to be born, the world will undergo severe economic and geopolitical earthquakes. What we are witnessing today, from oil market volatility and stringent financial sanctions to fierce technology races, are in essence consecutive chapters of a single book, the book on the war to dictate the global future. And the outcome of this grand shift will completely redraw the face of the world, where power is no longer measured by the number of oil barrels or bills printed with American presidents, but belongs to whoever masters the flow of knowledge, technology, and international trust. As a consequence, the world is witnessing the birth of unprecedented strategic alliances, where nations with inherently different political systems find common ground in the goal of reducing their dependence on Washington. Independent financial systems, cross-border trade routes free from Western control, and new currency baskets are continuously being tested. These are no longer symbolic efforts, but have become substantive steps, preparing for a post-US dollar scenario that nations have quietly planned for a long time. Looking back at the entire journey from Middle Eastern oil barrels to the future technology war, it is evident that the essence of global power is undergoing a profound evolution. The United States may still retain the upper hand thanks to its vast network of allies and superior military might, but its ultimate weapon is no longer invincible as global trust begins to fracture. Our international news bulletin will continue to closely monitor the developments of this grand shift, where every small fluctuation of the times could be the trigger for a completely new world order to step into the light. This process is pushing the global security and economic structure into a phase more sensitive than ever, where a single small miscalculation could collapse the entire chain system. The establishment of independent payment channels and core technological autonomy by nations is directly reducing the effectiveness of the sanction levers that Washington once used as an absolute power. When the battlefield is no longer one-sided, American deterrence begins to run into solid defensive walls built by the consensus of new power axes. It is this very stalemate that is forcing strategic planners in Washington to confront a brutal reality. The world is no longer a solitary playground for them to impose rules. Supreme power does not vanish overnight, but it is being diluted day by day through every commercial transaction in another currency and every independent technological advancement. This is not merely a challenge to the dollar, but a comprehensive test of a superpower's mettle against the elimination law of history. Will the United States accept sharing power in exchange for a balanced world, or will it continue to launch fiercer gambles to retain its throne? The answer is being written by the continuous fluctuations of the times at this very moment.